Hi, I'm Selena from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, and I'm here with Trisha Wooldridge, or TJ Wooldridge, for her children's scary stories. Trisha is a horror writer, but I'm going to let her tell you a little bit more about what she writes for those people who are unfamiliar with her work. Trisha?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Selena. So glad to be interviewed by Annie's, one of my favorite bookstores.
Thank you.
I do write horror. I also write science fiction, fantasy, all sorts of speculative work. That's kind of my favorite. They all do tend to be a bit spooky. I write novels, short stories, novellas, poetry, and like you said, all the stuff that is child friendly, I write under TJ Wooldridge. And those include novels, short stories, and all sorts of things. And yeah, if there's words, I'll probably play with it. And I edit as well. So I've edited several anthologies as well as novels for other authors.
Oh, wonderful. So, what can readers expect from your latest novel or books or short stories?
I've got a lot of latest things, thank you. So most recently, I just had a poem come out called Bathtub Mary. That is in 34 Orchard, which is, like I said, just came out this Sunday. It's a literary magazine online. There'll be links in the description so you can check it out. I'm really proud of this because this is an awesome, awesome issue of this magazine. It's just beautiful work. The other thing that came out just in March is I have a short story called Turnpike Mary Answers Prayers that came out in Paranormal Contact, which is out from Cemetery Gates Media. You can actually get a copy of this from Annie's or any independent bookstore. They will send to bookstores. That's another creepy one based on local urban legend in Massachusetts, Western Mass. There's a little shrine. All right, so out in November, it was Wicked Women, which is an anthology that I edited. It doesn't have my writing in it. It just has the writing of a bunch of other amazing women from the New England area who are members of the New England Horror Writers. I'm really, really proud of this anthology. Just the fiction, it's fantastic. And the cover is by Lynn Hanson, also a woman with a lot of ties to New England. I know she's been to Annie's a couple times. And that cover was the story I read from the slush pile, and I just had a nightmare after reading the story. It was so good. And that also is available from Annie's Bookstop. Definitely check it out. Find all the authors there. Then in October, I also had another short story come out. It's from More Lore from the Mythos. That was anthology inspired by Lovecraft and weird fiction. And for me, the story in there is based on an adventure I had on a writing retreat over in Cape Cod. So it's a little humorous as well as spooky. And it's told in a found footage style for a story. And last but not least, that came out in September of last year is Don't Turn Out the Lights, which is a tribute to Alvin Schwartz's Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I was also really, really honored to get into this one. It was really tough anthology to get into. Jonathan Mayberry edited it. And again, it was created as a tribute to all of the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which I grew up on all of those. And I know Annie's Bookstop has all of those old collections as well in their middle grade children's section. So, and that is also, the story for this one is also based on my experiences with horse rescue. So those are all the things that are currently out now that people can get a hold of, most of which right through Annie's Bookstop.
So, what do you think draws readers to these kinds of books?
Well, it really depends. A lot of people, I like that. Lovecraft, not exactly the best person in the world, but he had the quote of the greatest emotion, that the strongest emotion is fear, and the strongest fear is that of the unknown. Totally paraphrased. That's not the exact quote. But I like exploring things that frighten people. I like exploring fears because when you delve into fear, it also can be very empowering because it's in the pages of a story or in the words of a poem, and it explores it from a safe enough distance. And by looking at the things that frighten us, we really, I believe that people become better people, because it increases our empathy. We feel more empowered in our world, and we're more prepared for all the awful things that the world does give us. I mean, there's a lot to be afraid of in the world, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. That is true. So, what was the inspiration for your newest or latest story?
Well, they're all different ones, but completely unplanned. The poem that I have, Bathtub Mary, and the latest short story, Turnpike Mary, are both inspired from being brought up Catholic and the Catholic stories and beliefs around the Virgin Mary, Jesus's mom, Madonna. And there's two different looks at that. So the poem Bathtub Mary, so in the New England area, and other places too, but it's very much like a Catholic, usually less poor neighborhoods have little statues of Mary, of Madonna, on their yards, and they have like an old bathtub or something like that around her to imitate the grotto, which is where Mary often appears to people in like a grotto of some sort. A lot of times, like even dumps there, places where you throw trash, and there's just, abandoned places. And so that grotto sense, which also is kind of a mimicry of the birth of Venus in the half shell. So that seeing those around in the areas is the inspiration for that. And then a specific shrine on the Mass Pike, right between the Palmer exit and Sturbridge exit, heading eastbound on the Mass Pike. There's another specific shrine to the Virgin Mary, and a whole bunch of local stories and legends around that. I answered the question.
Okay. Okay. And what were the steps that you took to bring it from the initial inspiration to the finished product?
Those also vary based on which came out when. So for the poem Bathtub Mary, I wrote that a few years ago, and I always, for poetry, I almost always handwrite it first. So I handwrite it, and then I edit it as I'm typing it into the computer. And I have, when we were able to have group meetings more frequently in person, I had a wonderful critique group in Southbridge that was especially good with giving me feedback on poetry. So I would bring my poems there. So that went through a couple of rounds of feedback there. I've submitted it a bunch of times, and like with most submission process, you get a bunch of rejections, you try, wash, rinse, repeat. And then I saw the call for 34 Orchard, and I had been following that literary magazine for a while. My friend Chrissy Pearson's been over, edits it, and I'm like, I really want to be in this. So, and that one, Bathtub Mary, I felt hit the feel of that dark horror. It's 34 Orchard. It's this sense of like, there's a sense of place and like the scary, spooky, creepy things that happen in everyday situations that could be next door. And that's why I felt the poem was a really good match. And she agreed. So she was very happy to buy that and put it into this particular edition, which happens to have that sense of like faith, and that cover is perfect, the Let's Pray. With Turnpike Mary Answers Prayers, that one has an even longer how it came to be story. I originally wrote that as the story of the Turnpike Madonna was part of a larger novella that I planned to be a short story and ended up being a novella. And when I submitted it to, it was a local folklore anthology, the editor's like, there's a lot of really good stuff in this, but this is not a short story. And so I tried to rework it as a novella, and it wasn't quite working as a novella. It couldn't come together. So I put it on the back burner for a while. And then if you're a writer, you follow like open calls for submission. And I saw this call. It was started off on Twitter, and it was like the super secret call on Twitter. It wasn't publicized, but I happened to catch it. And they were looking for quiet confessional horror. And I'm like, that really fits that particular part, that story. And so I took just that aspect of the Turnpike Madonna and worked that. And the idea I had behind that is what happens. So the story of this particular shrine is if you say a prayer there, it will come true. So a lot of people will pause on the turnpike or say a prayer as they pass by. And I'm like, well, what happens if a prayer that shouldn't be answered gets answered? Like if someone prays for something that probably shouldn't be given to them. Kind of like taking that, be careful what you wish for, and making it be careful what you pray for. And so that was where I was looking at that. And so I was able to take just that aspect of it and make a short story. And the extra fun part with that is I almost self-rejected. So this is a fun story for all new authors out there. Don't self-reject. So I sent out the story and I got an email back the next day. And the email was like, we really liked it, but there's like this, this, and this. And I'm like, I didn't say no though. But like I was ready to assume it was a rejection. I sat on it for like a whole day, humming and hawing and rewriting an email. And I finally wrote an email saying, you know what, I can fix this, this, and this. Would you like me to resubmit? I get an answer back and they're like, yes, please do. I'm like, yes. So I reworked it all. I fixed all the things that he said. And I sent it back within a week. And then I got another email back saying, well, this and this didn't work. But again, it wasn't a no. But because it was the second one, I sat on it like I was even more nervous. I'm like, and it literally took me 24 hours. And I wrote like this email was like 3 paragraphs long explaining something. And then I got my head on straight and I waited for my husband to get home from work because he's a lot more level-headed than I am, especially when it comes to writing emails. And he looks it over. He's like, all right, no, you need 3 sentences. Like, I can fix this and I can fix this and I'll get it back to you by tomorrow morning. And I'm like, really? Like, yeah, just write that. And so I did. I sent my little 3-sentence email, made the fixes, and sent the thing back. And the next day I got the contract and the check. So new authors, don't self-reject. Don't assume that if someone gives you feedback that it's a rejection. Follow through. Unless it actually says, no, we're passing on this, then say, would you like a revised resubmit, or can I fix this?
That's great advice.
Thank you.
So what kind of research went into writing these stories?
All of my stories take a whole bunch of research, and I love researching. So I also have ADHD, so the research part of writing is just as much fun as the writing. So with, well, again, I grew up Catholic, was part of that. So I knew all of the stories about Mary. I knew about the shrines. I also grew up watching things like sightings and unsolved mysteries. And a lot of times those would include stories about the shrines and the churches where people would go and there would be miracles happening. They would leave crutches and wheelchairs at these shrines. And those always were just fascinating. My family took me to a few of those as we were growing up. And the fact that there was a local one that you just passed every single day. Well, not every single day, but you pass on the pike. If you grew up in Western Mass, you see that. And then there's this, and then when you've got these, like, you know, in your yard, backyard, front yard shrines, and sometimes some of those people would have stories where they would go see someone's Mary in their front yard, and miracles would start happening. Like there's stories around Western Mass. about a house in Greenfield who just happened to have a bunch of holy statues, and people would go there and miracles would happen. So that was just researching the history and lore of Western Massachusetts, with what came out in More Lore from the Mythos. Again, that was based on my experience with at a writer's retreat, where we saw these glowing little things on the beach in Cape Cod. And Cape Cod's not really known for their cool bioluminescent stuff. And so we were looking it up, and we didn't find anything on this until we got back home and then like saw something. So like just the fact that there's this thing and no one's written about this. Ooh, it must be aliens or Cthulhu or something like that. So researching that, and then other stories, I'll just dive into as much research as possible. So research comes from everywhere, and I enjoy the research as much as I enjoy the writing.
What's your favorite research story?
That's tough. That's really tough. Let's see. That's the husband of Awesome who saved my career. It really depends on what I'm working on. Whatever I'm currently researching is probably my favorite research. And I always have research going on. So people will give me, love you too, my husband of Awesome. He also helps me with research because he knows like stuff about, he's an engineer. So I ask all my science questions to him. But yeah, I always have tabs open. I'm always looking for research. So if someone posts something, say about Vikings and Scotland, that's another work in progress that I've got going on. Bookmark, save. Most recently, I wrote a retelling. I don't know if it's accepted or not, so fingers crossed, of Frankenstein. It's actually a sequel based on the original novel by Mary Shelley. And so I reread that, like really, really took a deep dive into the language she used so I could pay homage to that. And then I also did a whole bunch of research on World War II because I wanted to take that, and then the creature is basically immortal. So I want to toss him in World War II and make his life even more miserable. So I just did a deep dive into like hours and hours of research on World War II nurses and all the things that were happening there. So yeah, that's whatever I'm working on that I'm obsessing over is my favorite research.
Okay, that sounds great. So what was the biggest challenge in writing and putting out your stories, and how did you overcome the challenge?
Well, there was a challenge about possibly self-rejecting that went with Turnpike Mary.
Mm-hmm.
With Bathtub Mary, again, there's a lot of rejections with that. So that also is a challenge. There's also the challenge with like sharing these. So when I come to like, so neither Turnpike Mary Answers Prayers nor Bathtub Mary is a safe for kids story. And while I have a lot of mixed emotions on various organized religion issues and things, when I take a look and explore something, the fact that I do turn it into horror, I know people may not like that. They may not be comfortable with it. And while I'm good with taking myself to a place that's not comfortable and exploring that, I know that if someone who I know who has a different idea or a different opinion about how, about Mary, about religion, about Catholicism, they might not be able to deal with that. They might think I'm being offensive, and I'm not. I'm still being honorable. It's just I honor something by exploring it, by not assuming that it's all good, by going somewhere uncomfortable and sitting with that level of discomfort, which also comes from writing horror. So with a lot of the things that I do write, sometimes, I mean, the actual submission and the editing and all of that, those are all challenges. figuring out, oh wait, this story really isn't part of a novella. It really belongs on its own. Or something that I think is a poem and turns into a short story. Those are all challenges, but the biggest one is being willing to go to a place where I'm uncomfortable, where I feel fear, where I may not like what I'm exploring, and taking myself there in my head, and living with that while I'm writing it. And then also worrying about, well, I know to me, sharing something like that is like truth with a capital T, and it should be out there. Knowing that for other people who might read it, they might not be comfortable, and they might, attack me or be upset at me for having gone to that place. That's another challenge I get, particularly when writing horror, and anytime horror intersects with religion, in a lot of cases, feminism. I'm a feminist, and exploring those, because those are hot button topics, and worrying sometimes about dealing with the conflict around that can be a challenge.
Okay, you've hooked me. I need to hear Bathtub Mary.
Okay. So yeah, so this is, again, definitely not for children. And I do this, and I love those Mary shrines. But I know people will not see the beauty that I'm describing in this, and see what I'm looking at. So this is Bathtub Mary, and this is out in 34 Orchard. And here we go. They find murder victims in bathtubs, usually women. Blood stains drain not chocolate syrup, but blood, real blood, and all the other fluids bodies make. But blood from women is the most disturbing. Don't speak of bleeding women. Women's blood is taboo. If the Virgin Mary had been approached today in the United States at 15, they'd say God statutorily raped her, even though she gave consent. But it'd be all right for Joseph to marry her in a number of states. Outside of good Catholic homes, trademark, she lives inside bathtubs, stood on end, a mimicry of the birth of Venus, but not pagan, certainly not pagan. In the poorer neighborhoods, rust stains like blood where perfect porcelain meets fertile, unforgiven, unvirgin earth. She greets Avon ladies, Jehovah's Witnesses, survey takers, snake oil sellers with the same placid, non-judgmental smile. Like a whore, like a mother, welcoming all to kneel and pay or pray. Elements fade her clothes until she is naked plaster. Vandals and rebellious children paint her slutty bright, and time will spiderweb cracks over all her body with no care to her immaculate conception. Like a dead hooker in a motel bathtub, she is denied her pay. The divine feminine is broken into a million pieces, spiraling down a drain of recycled, rusty blood and prayers. And that's Bathtub Mary.
Okay, definitely not for children.
No, but it's an exploration of like this piece of faith that's also, right there every day, but also if you think of it, it's very much abused by the elements, but it still has that power for people. So
It's interesting that what made you write that as a poem as opposed to prose?
Because I was aiming more for an emotion with that feeling that there's not a growth or a change in there. For me, if something's going to be prose, it needs to have a story where a person will grow or change. There's an obstacle, and that needs to be overcome. The person either overcomes it or they fail.
Okay. Is there a character that you've written about that you loved or hated the most when you were writing, and why?
That again depends on what I'm working on. So I'm going to go back to, so I have ADHD. And so I usually have 5 or 6 projects going on at the same time. And depending on the project, there's usually a character that I love the most, or that I hate, or that's being a pain in the rear end. And so that really, really, really depends. As an overall, I can't really think of like one character out of all my works that stands out as loving or hating the most.
Okay. What else can we expect from you in the future?
That's a good question. So as publishing goes, it's one of those interesting things where a lot of things can come out at once, or then you've got like not much. So like I've just had like a whole bunch of months where something's coming out almost every single month. And right now I don't have anything currently that I know about that's coming out. I've got my fingers crossed on several submissions, one of which is the Frankenstein story I mentioned earlier. I really, really, really hope they take that. But I have a fantasy series that I'm working on that I'd like to put out, high fantasy. And then I've got another one that's a contemporary fantasy adventure series. But again, they're both works in progress, and I'm not anywhere near publication space for those. Maybe sometime this year, we'll see, but I don't know. I'm also writing a lot of poetry and submitting it. I try and do stuff into the Horror Writers Poetry Showcase, fingers crossed, and other anthologies and short stories.
So how often do you write?
Oh, that's a good question, because there's this advice that like people spout to writers all the time, which is write every day or write according to a schedule. And then that's just not going to work for me. I'm going to go back to, I have ADHD. A lot of writers I know are neurodiverse, and just our brains don't work the way everyone else's do. So for me, I write in fits and spurts, or furts and spits, however you want to put it. Just randomly I'll go and do a giant writing binge. So like the story I'd mentioned before, Frankenstein, I did the research and the whole 10,000 word rough draft over a weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, just ate it all up with that. And then I spent the following week editing it down to the submission, to the level it was for submission. And then I needed a break, and I didn't write for like a whole week or two after that, just because my brain's like, we're done, no output. And a lot of my stuff, that's how I'll do, especially again, when I had mentioned, when you're going into a place that's very that's uncomfortable, that you're exploring things you're afraid of or things that make you uncomfortable, you sometimes need a break. So a lot of the stuff that I've written for the New England Horror Writers anthologies, for example, what came out in Wicked Weird was a deep dive mentally into a lot of the medical issues that I've been going over, and the treatment women and fat people get from doctors. And that just like churned up a whole bunch of just pain and issues. And so I needed a break. Well, after I hit submit for that, it was weeks before I picked up another project. And then before that, I had done a poem about Alzheimer's dementia, which I had lost my mother-in-law to Alzheimer's dementia, and I loved her very much. And that was a lot of emotional. And then I also, because I'm me and writing about something that difficult was not hard enough, that particular one was a rhymed and metered 5,000 word story poem. So like while I was composing that, I was like literally writing text in iambic pentameter. And so once I hit submit on that, my brain was like, yeah, no, we're not writing until we have like a hard reset. So yeah, sometimes I need a break from writing, and other times I'll be in full binge writing mode.
Okay.
So that's how often I write.
Okay. So what is your favorite part about being a writer on the whole writing and publishing process?
The creative part, all the things that have to do with the creativity, the rough draft, the research, the early edits on it, or like when I get edits back and it's a challenge to fix those. All the stuff that work the creative muscles are my absolute favorite part of writing. Anything in that part, especially like if I'm in the zone and I'm like in this magical place where nothing exists except for what I'm working on. That's just like all the positive hormones are there.
Okay. And what do you consider the most challenging part of the writing process, and how do you overcome that?
Most challenging part is remembering to submit stuff and promoting stuff, and remembering to post on social media. And that's all. Also on top of that is if I've taken a break from a project and getting back into a project. All those are really hard. And there's just a number of ways that I do that. Sometimes I'll set up challenges. I have an accountability partner that we give each other challenges every week that we need to do. And if we don't do those challenges, we owe each other $1 for each thing we don't do. I'll set up other events or things where I'm doing to try and remind me to post stuff on social media and things like that. But mostly it's like trying to get other people to remind me to do stuff, because if it's not something, and this goes very much with ADHD and a lot of other neurodiverse issues, is if it's not something I enjoy, my brain is amazingly superpowered to avoid doing the thing. Like I am like a gold medal procrastination eventer. I will bake 10 different things and reorganize the kitchen when I've got something I need to do that I'm not super focused on. So working with that, working with so even seeing my therapist to get new tactics to tricking my ADHD brain to work, making sure I take my medications also helps. I've been a lot better since I was late diagnosed with ADHD. So since taking Adderall, everything's been better. And also dealing with other medical issues and actually having doctors help with that has also been helpful.
Mm-hmm. So, been your favorite adventure during your writing career?
Gosh, that's tough because I always have adventures. I love adventures. Probably as an overall adventure in my writing career so far is when I went to Scotland to research a novel I was working on. So my husband, as I mentioned, is an engineer, and he was working in Taiwan for a whole year, and we would meet in the middle in Europe. And one of the places was Scotland, and I'd always wanted to go to Scotland. So traveling around Scotland with my husband, and he let me organize the entire trip. He's like, I've got one request. We need to go to Islay, which is a tiny little island off the west coast of southern Scotland that has 14 whiskey distilleries on this little island the size of like Martha's Vineyard. And I'm like, all right, we can do that. But I also found out that Islay has the oldest ruins and this like secret meeting place of Scottish lairds. So like on top of awesome Scotch, I got to count all the research there. It also has the oldest working woolen mill in all of Scotland. And that's where they design the tartans for anything Hollywood does with Scotland. So yeah, going around Scotland and hiking, going through ruins where they said it's really a little too dangerous. We don't tell people to go there. I'm like, oh, really? So we're like hiking along this cliff with this drop down to find these old ruins. So that's probably one of my favorite adventures that totally I've used in so much of my writing, because even once I finished the novel, I had another novel in that series that was my MacArthur series for children. But since then, my contemporary fiction has also included Scotland. I've got a lot of photos that I've matched poems to based on my adventures in Scotland. Any whiskey facts came from that trip. So there's a lot that I got from that trip.
Wow, that sounds fabulous.
It was.
So what is the greatest lesson that you've learned so far in your writing career?
There's a lot of lessons. I'm always learning, probably because I make a lot of mistakes. So I guess the biggest lesson is to be kind to yourself, to really listen to yourself, take care of yourself. And that goes with the like trying again. So like you're going to get a lot of rejections, and you need to honor that that's going to hurt, to go forward. You're going to have to honor that there are some days that you're going to be too sick to work, that you might be in too much pain to work, that your brain has decided to go on strike, and so you're not going to go on writing. And in all of those cases, the most important part is to be kind to yourself and give yourself that space. Keep trying, but don't get down on yourself if you need to take some time off. Keep learning. Like if you can't do something, take some time to read, to learn things. Do what your brain and body need. You again, as you always need to keep learning, to keep getting better at your craft, at putting stuff out there, at seeing what the market and like how the proper way to submit, what people are looking for. That's all learning, and that's also part of what you need to be a healthy writer, is take the time to learn. Take time to go outside, go hiking, play with animals. There are times we put out, submit, write, and you empty kind of your bucket. And I forget which mentor told me, and I feel bad, but like sometimes you just need to fill your bucket. You need to take time away from the computer and read, go outside, fill all those emotions, all that experience, all that energy back up. And that's also very, very important to, your own self-care. So take care of yourself, keep learning, and listen to what your brain and body need.
Mm-hmm. So that's actually answers to my next question, which is, which piece of advice would you want to share with other writers?
Yeah, that would exactly be it.
Yeah.
Keep learning, take time for yourself, listen to what your own mind, body, and heart need, and take care of that.
And are there any groups, clubs, or organizations that you would recommend to other writers that have helped you in your career?
Yes, there are lots of them. Honestly, I think the reason that I've gotten as far as I have is because I do try to be very active in different writing communities. So one of the first writing groups I joined was Broad Universe, which is an organization for women and other underrepresented genders and persons in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Broaduniverse.org, great organization. It's how I started reading out loud. We've done book tables at conventions. There's a lot of resources in the group, people I talk to still. I love them. Then from there, I ended up joining the New England Horror Writers, which I've been in all of their anthologies, except for the one that I edited. I love them. I love going to conventions with them. I love the resources that we share on our group. And I'm actually currently on the board now for New England Horror Writers. So I'm happy to, help us do even more. And then from New England Horror Writers, I joined the Horror Writers Association, HWA. And I also ended up joining the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, where I've also gotten just so much wonderful information from the website, from the people, from the conferences. those are all great organizations. I know Worcester Writers Collaborative has been on a little bit of a hiatus, but if you're in the Worcester area, check it out. Hopefully we'll be able to start doing more, especially now that things are opening up and there's more chances to interact. And I think that's everything off the top of my head for writers organizations. Look for local writers organizations too. There's like even more, depending on where you are in the world. Go to conferences, go to conventions, and meet up with people. I go to a lot of local conferences and conventions where I see people, I've created writers groups. All of those are great things for writers to do.
Great. I have some questions about you as a person. What is one thing that most people don't realize about you?
Well, it's a weird question because there's a lot that I do. So I'm like super bubbly and excited at certain events. And so a lot of people assume that I am naturally an extrovert. I'm not. I'll call it like a bitrovert, an ambivert. I can sometimes just being out is exhausting, and it's a lot of work to put on the extrovert face and the personality. I'm also let's see. So I'm happily married to my husband of awesome, but I'm pansexual. Lots of people attractive. But it doesn't really come up, but I've been on a lot of programming to talk about that because it's invisible. A lot of people also don't realize that I've had chronic illness for years and years, besides being ADHD, which I've only recently been diagnosed and therefore been talking about. So all of the challenges that come with that I didn't realize were that a lot of times you think, what's wrong with me? I'm such an idiot. And I think a lot of authors have that. There's a lot of authors that are neurodiverse and don't have that diagnosed or don't realize it or are afraid to get it diagnosed. And so you don't realize the challenges people go through, the huge self-doubt that we have, those awful little voices that tell you, well, something's wrong with you because this works for everyone else, or why can you not do this thing you love? So that is a thing that a lot of people don't realize, is what all the internal struggles are with, and then I also get chronic illness, days that I'm in pain. Most people would have no idea. The days that people realize that I'm in pain, I am in crippling pain. But there was this low level of pain that was just, every day. And what am I going to do? I got to, go out there, do my work. And so people don't realize that. And then even just saying I have ADHD, people don't realize what goes into that. People assume ADHD is like the person bouncing off the walls and all over the place. And I can bounce off the walls and be super emotive. But a lot of that also is part of executive dysfunction, is being able to switch between tasks. How you have a shift on the car, you shift from, drive to reverse to second gear. And the brain doesn't do that. So you're like, I know I need to do this project. I should start working on this project. But you check Facebook and you physically, it's like you're possessed. You need to do a thing and you can't get your body to do it. And if I've just had a lot of stress, sometimes it's like I pull down the driveway, I'm sitting in my car and I'm like, I've got to get into the house. I've got to get into the house. I need to get out of the car and get into the house. And I'm stuck. And that happens with a lot of things, just changing between stuff. And then also emotional spikes that you don't expect. All of a sudden, you're just ferociously angry and you don't, it's for a stupid little thing. And you're extra angry because now you're angry at yourself for being so friggin' angry over this stupid little thing. So those are things that people don't know about me, that go on in my head. and that I also think go on in other people, that go on with other creators, authors, or anyone who is neurodivergent or has a chronic illness or anything like that.
Wow. Yeah, that's an interesting situation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So another thing, what question do you wish interviewers would ask you, and what would your answer be?
Well, today we didn't get to talk about my horse, so I wish a lot more people would ask me about my animals and my horse. So I've had a horse for 11 years. So before I got my horse, I volunteered for 10 years at a horse rescue, and I've always loved animals. I loved animals growing up, and it's one of those. My dream was to always like be with a horse, ride a horse. I loved unicorns since I was like 3. And so I have a horse. Her name's Calico Silver. She is a rescue. She's also old. She's going to be 27 this year, which is old for a horse. But she's just an amazing part of my life that it's one of those things where I was able to, it's like one of those childhood dreams that I grew up. And then working with her, like you don't even realize how much is involved and how awesome it is. Like you've got this idea, I want to have a horse and all that. And then when you actually get there, yes, it's a lot of work and it is expensive. But you don't even know that feeling of when you've got this like half-ton animal who's gone through a whole bunch of crap and you can communicate with them. Like you learn their body language, they teach you, and having that relationship. So when I go out to the paddock and I say, Calico, and she comes over, I'm like, this half-ton ginormous beast wants to spend time with me. And that just is such a great feeling. When you've worked with an animal, you've developed a relationship. And it goes for like, as soon as I went to college, the first thing I did was rescue a rabbit and illegally keep her in my dorm. So and I love that relationship you can get with any animal if you take the time to get to know. I've got 2 rescue cats now who are scaredy cats who I'm working on desensitizing and getting close to. Like last night, Gigi, who's this itty bitty little black cat. And the reason like you're not getting the cool cat zoom effect is because they're both scaredy cats. But she's this teeny little black cat. And for the first time in a month, she actually took treats out of my hand. And the fact that I was able to earn her trust. Now, this is a cat that would not come out of her kennel for anything. Like she would not come out where people could see her. And then Oscar, who's my giant fluff monster, he's a Maine Coon rescue. And he's also a giant scaredy cat. And he'll look big and scary, but the fact that he'll come out and he now like chooses to sit next to us when we watch TV, it's like an honor to have an animal get there. So with horses, with animals, just that sense, I'd like people asking about that because it's an amazing part of like who I am and the inspiration for a lot. You'll see animals in a lot of what I write. In fact, Skelly Horse, which is in the Don't Turn Up Lights, is based on my rescue horse experience. And yeah, animals. Ask me about my animals. I can talk for hours on animals.
Well, that was one of my questions a little later on, but I'm going to ask you now. And, you know, obviously you have furry or feathered or otherwise non-human companions. Do they help you or hinder you in your writing?
They do both with all their heart. So with Calico, with going out to the horse, so going out to the barn and also going to the barn, it can be a challenge because like, I'm a deadline. I don't want to go drive out to the barn. And it'll fall into this, like, I need to go out to the barn. Like going out and spending time with Calico, with all the animals at the barn. Because I also love the chickens. I'm friends with the goats. We have Canada geese who are friendly. Like she nests outside of the other horse, Kate, that I work with. So the time it takes to go out there can be a problem with scheduling because that's just part of the ADHD. not going out, like having that stupid spiral of I should be writing, I shouldn't go out to the barn, and then I get absolutely nothing done if I don't go. And then similarly, when any of my animals in the house are like, we need attention right now, I'm not writing at that point. I'm spending time. But they also give back, because being with them and having the relationship with them are inspirational and invigorating. So they also give, even if they do distract, because again, desensitizing these two cats, like I've spent hours just on the floor. So, giving them treats, talking with them, which is definitely not writing time, because you can't really divide that time. That's, attention for that. So they're both.
Okay. So you've already mentioned some of your passions and when you're not writing, but what are some of your other passions aside from the animals? And how do you make time for your non-writing hobbies and things that you love?
So that's a good question. I love being outside. The thing is like making time for non-writing stuff kind of just happens. It's like if I can't write, I go do other stuff. It's an important part of writing, of the brain, is to take breaks and do different things. So besides playing with my animals, I love to garden. I love going outside. I love hiking. In my garden, I like planting things. I really like killing things and weeding, especially like big projects. Currently, I'm doing a bunch of stonework so that I have less of the boring kind of weeding to do. So I'm covering all the places that I don't want plants with stones. And so lifting and carrying. I love hiking. I go out to Tower Hill Botanic Gardens with my husband. I love going out to arts. I love going to concerts. I love conventions or conferences. Those are also usually writing oriented. I like food. We like going out. We like whiskey tasting, all sorts of stuff like that.
Oh, great. What does your writing space look like? And what do you need to have around you when you're writing and editing?
I wish I could. It wasn't. Right now, it's an avalanche, or else I would like pick up my laptop and show you, because I'm doing this in my writing space. So that's what the back of my writing space looks like. I've got art. It's the desk itself is my grandmother's old mahogany desk. It's gorgeous. In my grandmother's lamp. I also have. Did I leave it in a place where I could reach it? Yes, maybe. Come here. Come to mama. I'm reaching a thing. Maybe. So this is actually my grandfather's pen, and well, the pen is mine. It's a macaw feather, little proper nib with horsey on it, and it's a marble base, and it has an old inkwell with it as well. So I like having that in my space. And then usually notes on whatever project I'm working on.
Oh, notes.
Yeah.
So, but you actually write with your computer rather than a notebook.
It depends. Like I said, the poetry I usually write in the notebook. And if I'm editing, I will print up a copy and make handwritten notes on those. And then if I'm editing for someone else, I will also have like a notebook of the stuff that I wanted to make sure that I cover, or a printed out piece of paper with notes on it.
Uh-huh. All right. And when you're writing, do you prefer music or silence, or what kind of music do you prefer, if you prefer music?
It depends.
I knew that was the answer.
Yes. So with poetry, I specifically don't want music or noise, because I need to be able to hear the rhythm of it in my head. I read it out loud while I'm writing, because I need to feel the poetry in my mouth, and music will mess with whatever rhythm I'm going for the poem. For prose or fiction, I definitely need music. And the music varies based on the project. So I'll usually have music that matches what I'm working on. And I listen to a wide variety of music. I'll listen to hip hop, metal, hard rock, Celtic music, folk music, and all those like in between goth, a lot of goth music. And so I'll usually pick various albums. I have an old school CD player that's still a 5 CD changer. So I'll pick specific music albums that go with the project I'm working on.
Ah, okay. And do you have any like favorite foods or drinks or that must be in the vicinity while you're working?
Water and coffee. I always need water. I'm a big proponent of people need to drink more water. And coffee is my other vice that I definitely need. So those are, I mean, the coffee goes away after like, I don't know, sometime, not too late. And the water is always on my desk because, again, hydration is important for health reasons. Occasionally, I will have some snacks, but I try not to eat too much. On the other hand, if I'm on like a binge writing session, Scott will like poke me. When did you eat last? I'm like, here, have food now. So food will appear when I need it. And so, yeah, so those are some of my needs.
Okay. And how important has the New England setting been to your writing?
Very important. I would say the majority of my work is set in and around New England. Definitely Bathtub Mary and Turnpike Mary are New England icons. The Beach Glow, which is in Tales from the Mythos, is set on Cape Cod. The settings that I have for my stuff are based on what I know in New England. Occasionally I'll go outside of New England and put stuff. So it still happens, but I also think like the New England area is just very inspirational to me. The landscape of New England is beautiful and also scary. I love that you can randomly walk in the woods and see these old stone walls from places that were, and you wonder who was here. Someone lived here. Looking at these old cemeteries everywhere, and like these little itty bitty old cemeteries that are like squished in like next to like a Wendy's, and then like there's a cemetery with like 100-200-year-old stones. I love those, and I love just the whole idea that I like the small town, but also we've got a few good sized cities. Being able to go between like a city like Worcester, which is the second largest city in New England, and then within half an hour I go down to where my horse is and I'm in the country. Like there's like 2 houses that you can sort of kind of see in the distance.
Wow. I only have 2 more questions for you.
Okay.
And first one is, where can people find your work aside from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, of course, although they should totally check here first. And
Absolutely.
I'm gonna give a little plug here for Annie's.
Oh yeah.
And you can get all of Trisha's books, and you can call us at 508-796-5613, and you can order the books by phone. You can come into the store, of course, and you can send us email, and by orders at anniesbooksworcester.com. You can send us email and we can order the books for you.
And also, since I live locally, if you request a signed one, I can just swing into Annie's and sign it for you.
Yeah, thank you, Trisha.
Welcome.
And where else could you get the books?
You can get several of them through other independent bookstores are able to order them. They are, of course, on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the usual places.
Okay. And the last question is, how can we follow your work and share your awesomeness?
Yay. You can follow me. My website is novelfriend.com, which is in the description below. I'm also sending out my April newsletter this week, and there's a link to my newsletter below. And I'm doing something special for all my newsletter people this month because it's also my birthday month. So if you're interested, sign up for my newsletter below. I also have a Patreon, which is specifically for my poetry and my art. So I do photo poems. I do pictures, some of which like from Scotland, and poems several times a month. So my Patreon for that is below as well. And then you can find me. I'm very Googleable at Trisha J. Wooldridge. So yeah.
Great. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Trisha. And I'm sure that we will be seeing you at the store sometime in the near future.
Definitely.
Okay.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great to be here. And thank you guys all for watching.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.